Hi, my name is Ram, and welcome to the series where we build real web application with React, Redux, and Node.js. The time has come to start working on our new application, Dungeon and Dragons stuff. So as you can see here, I have the shirt. That's shirt from RollerCon. That's the Role Players Festival that is held twice a year in Moscow. And I have the RollerCon cup, so I'm really prepared to geek out with a cup of tea here. So everything's ready, so let's get down to it. So here is in our plan what I want to achieve in this coding session, and I will split it in several parts. So in the first part, what we're going to do, we're going to handle this initial loading stuff. So what I want to achieve is when user loads the application, we actually want to load initial data from the server. Usually what happens is we display some kind of loading indicator, making requests behind the scenes, and when all the requests are done, when we have all the data that we need, only then we boot up our application. That's much better experience, and you will avoid a lot of bugs along the way, especially with authorization stuff. So that's basically what we're going to do first. We're going to redo a little bit our application. And after that, we'll handle the basics of localization. So we'll use React Intel and just set up two languages, Russian and English, and we'll see how it can be done. And then we'll continue developing our application in English. And at the end of it, when we finish with it, so in the long future, we'll just get all the data, all the strings that we need to translate with the help of a script, and then we're going to translate it, and we'll have the bilingual application. And after that, we'll start working on this user creates new character, because that's the most important stuff in our application. So there is very important thing that very often when we start working on our application, we focus on not the essential things. So for example, in this application, we could focus on things that we do not have. For example, we do not have character races in our database. We have empty database. Where can we get it? So we start with admin interface. So admin can add this data to the database. What the hell? We are developers. We know how databases work. We can, communicate with them on their language. So that's not necessary right now. We can do it manually just in database. And instead, we focus on the most important features. And the most important feature is for user, he already can sign up. So next step for him is to create a new character that he wants to use in adventures. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to create some routes, and we're going to talk about the form and lay down the foundation for this form. Okay. So that's basic overview of what I want to achieve in this coding session, and it will be split, I think, in maybe 2 or 3 episodes. So let's start with initial loading here. Let's go to our editor, and by the way, I switched to Visual Code Studio, so that's a new editor. We used Sublime Text before, now this one. So you can see how I use this one. Maybe you like it as well, because that's a pretty cool editor. Okay, so first of all, let's go to our app component. So what happens here is we want to make request when this app component mounts and fetch current user. But in the case when we do not have user, when user is not logged in, we do not want to do anything. We do not want to do anything special, but we still need to have some kind of loaded indicator. And we'll place it in our user model, in our user reducer. So right now here in user, we have just an empty state object. State equals empty object. But we'll have loaded here. And by default, it is false. So when our application starts, loaded is false. But then we need to make sure that we set it to true when we're done loading. And our application starts in this.js file. And here where we check if we have JSON Web Token for our user. So if we have one, we set authorization header and we dispatch user logged in. But what we now want to do is we just make the request to the server right away. We'll make the request, we'll get data from server with user details, and that's it, right? So basically we're going to remove these lines. We will not decode our JSON Web Token anymore. Otherwise, if we do not have it, we'll need to update our reducer user model that loaded set to true. Okay. So for that, we're going to use something like user fetched action. So let's start from the app though, because it will be easier to understand the flow of all of this. So first of all, in our app, we're going to transform this app to class component that extends react.component, and there's going to be a render, and it's going to return all of this markup from here. I'm going to just copy everything and paste it here. Also, our app uses these variables, so I'm going to just cut them and place them at the top of the render method. Const equals to this.props. Let's save it. Let prettier do its job. Now, next we do component mount, and inside of it, if this props is authenticated. So yeah, if user is authenticated, then we going to make the request to the server. So we'll do this props.fetch current user. Okay, so this fetch this fetch current user is just the thunk action. So it will make the request and we get back the user details, but only if user is authenticated. If it's not, we do not want to do that. But also we do not want to do that if user is already loaded. We do not need. But we're gonna do it later. So now we need to have this fetch action. So we'll have fetch current user, and we're going to import it from actions users. And next, at the bottom here, we'll add it to the connect fetch current user, like this. Of course, we need also to add it into prop types, so we'll have fetch current user prop function. Okay, so now we're having the fetch current user, and we use it in component mount. Nice. Next, we need to define it. So let's go to users, and let's create a new thunk action, and we call it fetch current user. It takes no data, and it will use API user.fetch current user. And then we'll have user, and then we're going to dispatch new action. Dispatch. We call it user fetched, and we pass down user to it. Good. So now we need to create this. So we're going to export constant user fetched. That equals to function that takes user, and it returns type user fetched, and we pass down user. So now we need to import user fetched from types. Okay. Now also, of course, we need to go to types and create this constant user fetched. Done. So the next thing is in API, we need to create this fetch current user. So let's go to API and let's add here the fetch current user. That's a function. We take access, get request to API users current user, and it will respond, and we take the res data user from the response. Okay. So that's done. Next, we need to go to the reducer. So we go into user reducers here. Let's import the user fetched. And inside of here, when user is fetched, let's do it here. Case user fetched. We're gonna take the whole state that we already have here, just in case, and then we're gonna override it with action.user that we passed, and then we set loaded to true, because after user is fetched, we consider that user is loaded. Another thing here, when user is logged out, we also want to set loaded to true. We know that when user logged out, we know that user is loaded, right? It's the final information. So we set it to true here as well. Okay, So that's what happens on the app component. So when it mounts, we making the request, we check if user is authenticated. If user is authenticated, we making requests to the server to get current user details, and then we populate our user here, and we set loaded to true. And now we can use this loaded to display whether loading indicator or our application. So let's go back to app component. And to display loading indicator, we're going to use yarn add react loader. Done. Now we can import this loader. So let's import loader from React loader. Oh man, loader. And we're just going to enclose everything into this loader. So we'll have loader. And I'm going to just cut this stuff from here and paste it at the end of here. So this loader takes one prop loaded. It could take more, but you can read the documentation about it. And if it's loaded equals to true, then it will render everything that is inside of this loader. But if it's false, it will have this loading indicator. So we'll have loaded here. So let's deconstruct it, destructure it here, loaded from props. That means that in props, we expect loaded to be a Boolean, and we take it from our state. So loaded equals to state.user.loaded. Of course, later we'll change this line to use the selectors, because again, loaded state of application is not only user, it could also be something else. Several entities, for example. Okay, so that's done. Let's go to the browser. I think we messed things up, right? So now we having this loading indicator because we were not logged in, so we do not have token, and also we do not. But I think we're making the request. Let's have a look. Let's reload the page. Are we making the request? No, we're not. Yeah, because we are not authenticated. That's good. That's good. We're not making the request, but we're still having this loading indicator. So let's go back and let's go to index.js file. So here is where this logic comes into play. So if we have token, then we'll do some stuff. But if we don't, we need to set loaded to true. And we can do it with store by dispatching action, basically. Dispatch, and we have the user fetched. So user is not logged in, so we fetched empty object user. So let's add it from here, user fetched from users. Let's go back here, let's reload the page. Now it works, that's good. It works for non-authenticated user. So let's try to log in. And now we have a problem with login. And that happens because here as well we need to change something. So right now we decoding stuff, and also it happens because we actually making the request, but we haven't created the request on the server. Here it is. So this is API, not a website. So yeah, but it still works on the following reload, but it doesn't work when we just logged in. A bummer. Okay, so first let's delete all of this. So what happens here when we have token in our local storage is we set authorization header. So now every request will have this token, and then we'll just dispatch fetch current user. And that will do everything, right? So we'll just add here fetch current user, and we can get rid of user logged in and from the JSON decode. Okay, so now we have a real problem because we do not have anything in our Redux right now. Our Redux is actually empty, so user model is empty, and after that we set it to true. Not good. So in our API, let's create new route. So we go to users, and here let's create eRequest, get request to current user, and we need to authenticate this request. So we expect only the authenticated user to make this request. So we're going to import authenticate from middleware's authenticate, and then we just add it here as the middleware. So now, because we added here in this request object, we have current user, and what we could do is we could do response.json user and just request current user. Okay, don't do that. And here's why. So if we reload the page, you'll see that now we are logged in, but in our Redux you can see that we have this password hash, and that's really bad. But sometimes I see that these errors actually happen in production applications, or for example, a lot of applications, web applications right now send password by email. That's just one of the hosts that I used for some time. They just allowed you to see your password right in the web application. It's crazy. Okay, so that's not good. So let's fix it. There are several things to do that. You can do it with MongoDB just to filter and whitelist only the parameters that you want to have in your current user. That's one way to do that. We'll go very simple way. We'll just have user object and we'll just construct it. We need to have email with request current user.email, and we need to have the confirmed. I think that's it. That's all that we need. So now, if we reload the page, yeah, our state is much better. All that we have here is loaded, email, and confirmed. That's good, but now I think we have another problem. Yeah, we can go to the dashboard. That's because right now I actually removed the token from the Redux, and basically we do not need to have it there. We do not do anything with this token on the client side, except that we just make sure that it is there and we include it into the all the requests. So if you go back here and let's go to our components, routes, where are our routes? Yeah, here, user route. Here's where we check for is authenticated this state user token. That's why we should use selector here. But we are lazy, so we're gonna have just email. So if there is a user with email, it means that user is authenticated. So now we can go back to dashboard. That's good. And if you load the page, you can see that we have this loading indicator, and then we have in our application. If we go in, we're going to log out, everything works. If we go to the dashboard, we are redirected back. So hopefully we didn't, ruined a lot of stuff, but we still can't log in. Why is that? So let's have a look. The constructor loaded is marked as required, but its value is undefined. So let's track down what's going on. So when we log in, we dispatch action with the users. So not users, auth. And here is login. And what we do here, we have the API, then we have the token there, and then we set authorization header, and then we dispatch user logged in with user. But that's not enough, right? Our user has some information. If we go back to our Redux, we'll see that we have loaded, email, confirmed, username. Oh yeah, username, we need to have username as well. And we have token, but we do not have loaded. Loaded is wasn't in the response, so that's why it became false. So all we need to do is just to destruct it here. We'll have user, and we add loaded to true. Let's try to log out, and let's try to log in again. And now it works. Great. But now here we have username, but if we reload the page, we will not have username because we forgot about it. So let's go to API and let's add username here as well. Username. Let's be lazy. Username. Like this. So now if you reload the page, we have username. Nice. Whew. So I think we accomplished what we wanted to do. So if we log out, we have this, the main thing here is that we have loading indicator. And now we can load our application initially with all information that we need for this application be very fast. And yeah, that's the purpose of the single page applications and React stuff, right? So that's a good place to commit our change. So here we have the load current user details, done. Oops, done. And we render loading first and then proceed to app when it's done. Done. Nice. So let's commit this change. In API, we just added the current user API endpoint. And on React, we added initial loading, initial app loading. Commit messages are hard. So let's take a break. And thank you very much for your time. If you like this episode, just hit the like button, subscribe to this channel, share it with your friends, colleagues, loved ones, etc. And yeah, spread the word. If you want to support me, you can become a patron, or you can make one-time donation via PayPal, or even better, you can go to jsfullstacker.com and purchase my course. Thank you very much for your time, and have a great day.